This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch or get 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. One of the most interesting things about doing this podcast for as long as we've done it now as well is like it's a really interesting mental exercise to routinely become like obsessed with a certain franchise or like mythology or property, and then after the 2 weeks is done, immediately push it aside. You know? like you wrote a 2.5 hour Mission Impossible episode.
Yeah.
We'd thought about Mission Impossible since then. Hellraiser, do you still think about Hellraiser much?
Yeah. Nah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Little bit, but I bring this up because this is the first episode I've MC'd in a month, and
yeah,
it's on Final Destination. This, of course, is film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast, and where we talk about franchises on this podcast. That's what we do. And
is this your first time being the MC for a horror franchise?
I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was up till 3:22 a.m. Writing the following podcast you're about to hear, dear listener. And as I was doing
but
it,
AJ,
I was like...
you haven't sent me my lines.
Sorry, dude. You'll figure them out. Just... What does he say in Back to the Future, where he's like, all right, watch me for the changes and try to keep up.
Oh yeah, it's a blues riff and B, watch me for the changes and try to keep up.
That's what podcasting with each other is like, you know. So my name's AJ, and this, of course, is Richard. And this podcast, this episode, we're talking about the 5-film Final Destination series, which I had seen the first 3 of before, and have always been really fascinated by, but kind of lost interest in them as they went on. So this podcast has served a good purpose in finally making me watch a series I was relatively interested in, you know.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, being I've said many times, I am like not a big fan of horror, but this franchise has kind of almost gotten me into it. Like this podcast on the whole. Like I've watched some terrible horror films, and I've watched some pretty good ones as well. And now I'm like, you know what? I could probably watch a few of these.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that. I'm very proud of you that you've conquered your fear of and distaste for horror movies and have actually like watched nearly 100 by this point, probably.
Yeah, I would have actually, because you think 20 Freddy vs. Jason, 11 Hellraiser, 10 what was the thing?
11 Halloween, 10 Hellraiser.
Oh, yeah. And 5 Final Destinations, 4 Screams. That's 50 right there.
Yeah, there you go. So, let's just crack into it, Richard. You know, oh, by the way, just in case this comes up later, the Christchurch, where I'm recording this from, is currently in the midst of a wind, a windstorm,
in
a
the
hurricane,
midst of a wind.
Or something. It's very warm. And I really like warm days where it's windy, but I'm spending this warm day where it's windy inside. I'm talking to you. But so, I don't know, if the wind picks up later and you hear a door slam in the distance, that's why. But I think it's all good. I think I think my sound setup is all good so far. Before we do crack into it, though, I do just want to say, if you have been listening to this podcast for a wee while now, please remember to hashtag spread the cult and tell 2 friends about this podcast. Post it on Facebook. Post it on Reddit. That would help us. And just
post it on the AV Club if you listen.
Yeah, all those guys from the AV Club, please share this with your friends. Now that I've finished whoring myself out, let's crack on into it, Richard.
All right. Da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da.
It's the final
destination episode of Film Franchise Fortnights.
Yeah. This is momentous. This feels like a tentpole in the lore of franchises, you know. So, all right, I'll stop pussyfooting around and get into it. The Final Destination franchise is a series of 5 horror splatter thriller films, which all follow the same simple setup. And if you've never seen them before, that simple setup is a group of people are saved from a fatal accident after one of the people in the group has a premonition, and then they find themselves dying one by one in the following weeks or months in increasingly more horrific accidents, as if the very force of death is coming after them. The series is famous for its Rube Goldberg machine-style ways in which the characters meet their demise, where one seemingly inconsequential event will lead to another until it results in a character getting a ladder railing to the eye or cut into pieces by a wire fence, that kind of thing. So it's...
Well, there are other things, it's not just those two.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, every death in the series is one of those two. You're like, maybe we should keep away from ladders. So the series stars a few household names, or at the very least people you may recognise but not know their names. This includes Sean William Scott, who's in the first film, Ali Larter, who is in the first and second film, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's in the third film, and David Koechner, who's in the fifth film. A few of them also star Tony Todd as the mysterious mortician. He is famous, I believe, for playing the Candyman, which is another horror icon we've yet to cover.
Has Mary Elizabeth Winstead been in a previous franchise we've covered?
I feel like she hasn't.
Yeah. I don't think
we
so.
will get to some
Oh, actually, do you know what?
Though.
She's in Live Free or Die Hard. Which I've covered on the podcast before.
Wow.
But it hasn't been released.
No one's heard it.
Yeah, because I was going to say that Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Sean William Scott, and who was the other one? Oh, and Ali Larter have all been in previous films covered on the podcast.
Yeah.
Because Sean William Scott is obviously Stifler in American Pie, and Ali Larter is the...
Yeah, she's from Legally Blonde, just say it. You're cutting into my randomly placed useless statistics further down the list.
Okay. I'm being a bad podcast boy, I'm sorry. One
person that doesn't star in these films, though, is Ashley Tisdale, despite the fact that she apparently auditioned for a role in the last 3 films. And they didn't give it to her. She auditioned for someone who dies in the first scene of Final Destination 4, sorry, The Final Destination, and is never seen again, and still didn't get that role. So I don't know why the producers don't want someone as bankable as Ashley Tisdale in their film. But you know what? That's also from IMDb and may not be true, because how much can we trust IMDb trivia?
Yeah, well, like maybe she because the Final Destination, what was that, 2009, and the first High School Musical was like 2007.
Yeah,
so yeah, I guess she would have been, but because it would have been like, you know, similar to like the Scream kind of thing, like get like a bankable actress and kill her off in the first scene.
I saw High School Musical in 2006, dude. Just to be pedantic, I saw it.
I was wondering if you would like back me up. I was like, yeah, what was it like, 2007?
And I was like, no, you fucking idiot. I'm gonna stitch you up now. I'm gonna rinse you. Alright, so the 5 films began in the year 2000, just before, a year before they couldn't make a film about a plane crash. So they just eked across the line. So that film was, of course, called Final Destination. It was directed by James Wong. It has 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. So not very good.
It's cool that you didn't let me guess.
Sorry, did you want to guess?
Yeah.
I just assume you always look them up beforehand, so I didn't want to allow you the opportunity anymore.
Let me guess.
Okay, what do you think it is?
I reckon it'd be like just below fresh, like 50-something.
It's 34.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I thought you were going to guess 34, and then I would have been like, you looked it up beforehand, but you went in a different direction, and it's my responsibility as a comedian to follow where you take the joke instead of reeling it back in as I'm doing now.
Yeah, and explain what you thought I was
exactly. What is Final Destination about, Richard? Can you summarize the extraordinary complicated plot that is Final Destination? I'm being sarcastic.
Well, I mean, like you've literally It's like Mad Libs of what you've already said. So,
shall I put it another way? What is the initial accident that one of the characters sees, and what happens in the end? Is basically all you need to know.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say. That it's you've got like now like person's name has a premonition while on, and then it's like So can't remember the guy's name, but he has a premonition. Huh?
His name's Alex because he's my name.
Alex has a premonition of a plane crash. Well, and more like a plane like explode. It doesn't crash into anything. It kind of just disintegrates in the sky. And then while he's on the plane, and then when he comes out of the premonition, all these little things start happening exactly like he predicted, and so he freaks out and basically says we have to get off the plane, and him and his schoolmates are going to Paris, and then they kind of all get kicked off the plane. Everyone else is pretty reluctant to leave. But then, as they're all arguing at the airport, they see the plane take off without them, and it explodes in the sky just as he foresaw. And then they all start dying in mysterious ways, starting with their friend Todd, and Alex gets like some kind of sign that Todd would die while he was dying, and so then they work out that they can kind of predict who is going to die next because it's all based on what order they would have died in the plane crash. And then eventually it ends amazingly. One of my like these films have real good endings.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, the first one's probably my favorite though. It's like one of my favorite film endings because they find out that you can like skip someone. So yeah, you've got like five people.
If you save someone just before they're about to die, death will skip them.
Death will skip them, and they're like, "Oh, cool! I'm free. I can never die." And then it's like it cuts like 6 months later. There's 3 of them still alive, and then Alex realizes, "Oh shit! Wait, it's not over." And this sign starts to fall and kill him, and then his friend, who's also still alive, saves him, and he's like, "Wait, but if you're still like gonna die, then who's next?" And like while he says this giant sign is like swinging towards him, about to kill him, because he was skipped, and it's like if the list is then repeated, he's now at the top of it. And then it cuts to black, and then you hear it crash. It's very funny.
We'll get more into the specific deaths. Not all of them are worth talking about, but we'll mention a few of them after the film synopses section is over. So, 3 years later, in 2003, we got Final Destination 2. That was directed by David R. Ellis. What does that have on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to go 40.
48. So, considerably higher than 34%.
Yeah, I figure it's higher than I imagine it'll be higher than the first one, but still not fresh.
No, none of the spoilers. None of these are fresh. Like they barely peak above the line. But I think you've got to review the Final Destination films in context with each other. They're not about films in general. They're about where they sit with each other, kind of, because they're horror films. You know, no horror film is, well, barely any horror films are rated fresh. So, what is Final Destination 2 about?
Well, same setup. You've got premonition and everything, and this time it's like a massive pile up on a highway when a truck carrying a bunch of logs breaks, and so she has the premonition. They're driving behind it. But one thing that this film did that I was like, oh, fuck, that's a really cool twist, is that she has the premonition and then they stop everything, but then all of her friends in the car with her still die. And so now it's like her trying to cheat death with all these random strangers, because I was like, I actually like said, oh, here we go again, you know, you got like all your sexy teens that are gonna like, you know, get in bikinis and avoid death, and they all died, and I was like, okay, this is actually really clever, and this has actually really subverted my expectations. Ali Larter's character from the first one comes back because she was the only person to have fully cheated death. She checked herself into a psychiatric ward where she'd be completely safe, and basically, you know, they try and cheat death, but and correct me if I'm wrong, this is like the only time where we actually have survivors. there's two that we
we will get into that later. But yeah, basically the way so each film is kind of the familiar setup, you know, and well, with one or two caveats put on it. So in the second one's definitely the most the second one I feel like is the one that changes the most and explores the rules the most. So the two things that the second one is like notable for is death is now working in reverse of who would have originally died, because the reason it's after these people specifically is that they were all meant to die before, but the survivors of the flight from the first film interacted with them in some way and inadvertently saved their lives after they should have died.
Yeah, all the deaths in the first one somehow elongated the lives of the people, of the survivors.
Yeah, so death is course correcting, so he's working backwards through it. And the other thing they work out in this film is so in the first film they're like, oh, the way to cheat death is to save someone just as they're about to die, and that skips them. In this film it's new life, where from someone who should have died will break the chain. So they think it's a pregnant woman who should have died giving birth. She gives birth, but then they realize she wasn't actually ever going to die. So the main character, Kimberly, she drives a truck into the water and drowns, and then is then resuscitated, so she does technically die but then comes back, and so new life breaks the chain. Sweet. So
and then her and the cop who was there at the scene of the accident, they end up both surviving. And that's the only time that someone survives and we never hear from them again.
Maybe, Richard. I'll let you know in about an hour. Because that's how long it's going to take us to get there. All right. 3 years later, again, we had Final Destination 3 in 2006. James Wong, the director of the first film, once again returned to direct the third film. And what does this have on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to go like 36.
It has 43%. Okay. So still more than the first one, but not as good as the second one. So
I was going between the two. So
yeah. What's Final Destination 3 about? What are the things that make that one special and different from the other ones in the series?
Okay, so this one is the accident is a roller coaster derailing, but the thing that makes this one different is it's got Mary Elizabeth Winstead in it. None of the other ones do. But the cool thing about this, and this is one of those things that I almost wish they'd introduced in this one and then kept going, is that they were taking a bunch of pictures all night, and the pictures they look at the pictures of each person and they have clues to how they're going to die, and they work that out, and then they try to use those to save each other.
So for example, two girls who burned to death in a tanning salon, their photo was obstructed by what looks like flame, like a random lens flare in the photo makes it look like they're on fire in the photo. Another character is shot in the head with a nail gun, and her photo is someone pointing a pretend gun at her head. So that kind of thing. So they work it out, and that film ends with them seemingly cheating death only to find themselves dying on a subway.
Yeah, she has another premonition while on a subway that she's going to die, but then has no way of avoiding it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so yeah, that was that one. And then another 3 years later, we got The Final Destination.
All right, cool. So this is the last one.
Yeah, you'd think so. And this was directed once again by David R. Ellis. And according to IMDb, our trusty source, this is the only film franchise in which two directors trade off films back and forth, apparently. So David R. Ellis, returned from Final Destination 2 to direct this one. What does this have on Rotten Tomatoes?
I like 13.
I wish. It's got 28%.
Really? Okay.
It deserves 13. What is this film about?
So the accident in this one is they're at a speedway, and cars are sliding around. They're making dolphin noises when they do so.
It's actually a dolphin noise. It's on IMDb again in the trivia section of this film. It's like, it's a dolphin noise, and it's like, yeah, everyone could tell it's a dolphin noise.
Yeah, there's a car is like skidding in oil, and as it drives away, it goes like, ah! It's like the SpongeBob censoring sound effect. But yeah, so there's like a speedway crash, and it the cars fly
Decimates.
into the audience and everything like that. And then, sure enough, someone has a premonition and get a bunch of people out.
You don't even need to say what happens in the ending, because this is the least creative one in the whole series.
What's like... Because I know that they do... Oh, he has, like, visions at night. Yeah, so he has, like, dreams at night that all... And this was one thing that was kind of cool at the end of it, is that all of his dreams have the word, it's here. So he'll have, like, these flashes of random things, and they work out that Death's doing an order, and then it'll be like, it's here. And then... So... and then at the end of the film, what's the accident that gets them all at the end?
A truck crashes into their cafe and crushes them all one by one.
Yeah, and then and it cuts to like the credits, and you see them like their skeletons. It's real dumb.
The main thing you got to know about the Final Destination is it was essentially a vehicle when 3D first came back. So this whole movie is just a masturbatory 3D fest, and it sucks. I hated this one.
It shows, yeah. But yeah, like right at the end of the film, he's sitting in a cafe and they realize, wait a minute, it's not over, because he sees like scratched into the desk, into the table he's sitting at. So he's like, it's coming, is crossed down. He starts to move his hand, and you can tell it's about to say, it's here, and then he gets hit by a truck. So
yeah, that's that one. And then only 2 years later, this time in 2011, we got Final Destination 5. There's no Final Destination 4, but okay. And this was directed by Stephen Quayle. What does this have on Rotten Tomatoes?
60.
This is 62% on Rotten Tomatoes.
So it is rated fresh.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, true. So this is the highest rated of the series, the fifth one.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
There's a very specific reason why.
Yeah, exactly. What is this film about?
So the premonition accident on this one is that they're on a field trip or something, are they?
They're on a business trip because they're young adults. They're yo-pros in this one.
And they're going, and the bridge they're on collapses, basically. Yep. It's like a big suspension bridge. Not unlike the Golden Gate Bridge, and it basically just fucks out and collapses. Mm-hmm. And then, what's the, like...
So there's two caveats to this one that we should mention, and then we can move on. Yeah. The one caveat is they work out that the way to cheat death is to murder someone and you take their life. So they die in your place and you take their life. So, obviously one of them goes crazy towards the end and starts trying to kill one of them, because one of them actually survives in the premonition. So she's actually saved the whole thing. And the other thing that's significant about this film, from here on out we'll be talking spoilers for a film that actually has quite a clever... twist.
Oh, that's great! It's one of the best.
Yeah. At the end of the film, you see the two survive. Well, there's actually three surviving characters, but two of them get on a plane, and then they see the events of the first film, pan out, and it turns out this whole film has been a prequel. It's been set in the year 2000. If you look closely, you'll see they use old phones and old computers all the way through it, and so the main characters, thinking they've cheated death, actually die in the Flight 180 plane explosion from the first film. The only character who's left alive at this point is a dude who accidentally killed a co-worker, and so he took his life, but then he finds out that the co-worker had an inoperable brain tumor and he could have died at any moment, meaning that the life he took was only partially increased, and then a piece of debris crushes him. And that's Final Destination 5. So... yeah, overall, the series received mixed to negative reviews. What you'll see over and over when you read about this stuff is people praising the creativity of, like, the kinetic death sequences and the originality of not having death portrayed as a living person, but rather like a external force. But a lot of critics think basically the series is just really fucking dumb and cynical and pointless. There's like philosophy papers that have been written on the series, and they note that 4 out of the 5 stories have tragic endings where the characters die anyway, meaning they may as well have just stayed on the plane or the roller coaster to begin with. And the hopelessness of the series is kind of intriguing the first or second time you see it, but when it keeps happening after a while, it's just a real bummer. And so people are like, there's no point, there's no agency, there's no suspense because you can't cheat death. So that's,
which is, I mean, that's life, isn't it?
yeah, but death also in real life isn't doesn't really have agency. Death is more random than it is presented in these films, which is, these aren't my words. These are something I read, and I'm not even going to credit them because I can't remember where I read. Go on the Wikipedia page for Final Destination 3. That's where I get my sources from. So, Richard, what are your thoughts on the franchise as a whole? What is your favourite film, and how would you rank them?
Oh, all right. As I said at the start, that, you know, horror isn't really my jam, but films like this, especially like Scream, like the first Scream, I would rank in like my top 5 favorite films I've ever seen. These films, I really even when they're bad, I really enjoyed them. And I said to you the other night, like, I can't imagine not having a good time watching one of these. Like, these kind of films are their own. And you get this with like kind of all schlocky horror, is that when they get too bogged down on like trying to have a good story, that's when they kind of start to suck. But I mean, these films, they're never concerned. They have a great premise, I think anyway, like a fun, clever premise, and you can just it's like I said, it's Mad Libs. You just chop and change whatever you feel like, and you would have to really fuck up to make one of these not fun to watch. But for, you know, the podcast's sake, we'll rank them. So, the first one does have a lot of charm to it. And, you know, by being the first, it's kind of got a bit of a leg up because it is the same plot every time. So, I'll probably go first one first, and then Final Destination 3, because I love the mechanic of the clues, because that's one thing that, like, if you'd asked me what Final Destination was about 2 weeks ago, I would have said, oh, and then they have clues that they try to find out which one, because that was one of the things that I thought was in all of them.
They do all have clues. It's just the photos are the most plot devicey of all the clues. Like, you have premonitions and stuff.
Yeah. So then I'd go 3, and then probably 5, because the ending elevates a lot, and it's got a couple of really good death scenes. Like, that's one that I can see, because obviously they didn't plan on doing another one after 4, judging by the title, but you can see why a new voice came into it and was like, no, I have one that's good enough to make. And they were like, yeah, well, it is good enough. And then I got that, and then 2 is where we start to get bogged down a bit with the story, so it wasn't quite as fun, I thought, and then 4's just objectively the worst one.
So you have quite a different ranking to the critics, because the critics go 5, 2, 3, 1, 4, and so you go 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
All
right, I'd probably having said that, because I thought, I have to, you know, put number 1 as 1. I'd probably actually go like 3, 5, 1, 2, 4.
Wow, you liked 3 a bit more than me, I think. But overall, the series,
I think the likability of Mira Elizabeth Winstead,
right? Yeah,
and
she is
the
good.
Mechanic of the photos,
so
I enjoyed.
Yeah, for me, overall, I'd say you kind of have to take a lot of the series with a grain of salt. You kind of do have to view them as like dark comedies. And this is a problem we've seen in a lot of slasher films, is like traumatic experiences such as watching your friend die in front of you. These kinds of things are often immediately swept over in favor of moving the plot forward. Like, Sean William Scott gets decapitated, and 10 seconds later, Alex is like, it worked! Your death skipped you! To the guy who survived. It's like, your fucking friend just died, dude. Like, this is horrible. So that kind of thing happens a lot. They are
really funny movies. Like,
once
you start viewing them as comedies of errors, like, you know, they're just like, oh man, I can't believe how silly that was that happened. Then that's like how you crack them to being really enjoyable.
Yeah. A more realistic portrayal of the series, I think, would depict would show a lot more funerals, because people just move on. There'd be a lot more PTSD, a lot more people just frozen in place, unable to move for days, and a lot more scenes of characters giving statements to the police after various deaths. There are a couple, but there should be one after every death that someone sees. And instead,
but they would just be boring.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, the characters are like, damn, another one bites the dust. oh well, who's next? Like, so yeah. So,
but at the same time, like I can understand that, because if you've got this unknown force coming after you, and you're shown through all of your friends that it's completely inevitable, you do kind of, your next port of call is I need to save myself.
Yeah, for sure, I get that. So first place for me is a toss-up between the first, second, and fifth film. The third one to me is kind of the stale point of the series, I think, and the fourth one is a hot pile of garbage. A lot of people seem to prefer the second one to the first, and I think I understand that a lot of people would say it like improves on it, but I just really love in the first film how there's a definitive map which shows the order in which the survivors will die. It's shown on the screen. It's like, this is why the plane crashed and the plane exploded, and there was a short circuit in this chair that led to this chair and followed the wiring, and Alex traces it, and that's like a definitive map. This is the order of how people are going to die. And the other ones, it's just remembering from a premonition, which I wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be able to remember.
The premonitions are all shown in like third person, so
yeah, exactly.
It's like, are you remembering what's happening in other people's cars? Like,
yeah. And I also, in the first one, I really, I think this is what like almost just as good as it was a prequel twist. In the first film, Alex believes he's next on the list, but then while he's like hiding away, he remembers that he actually switched seats on the plane, and so it means what's her name's next? What is her name? Claire.
Yeah.
Clear. Claire. like not how you spell Claire, but that's how you spell it in this.
And people pronounce it like that as well. They go Claire. Hey, Claire, not Claire.
Yeah, exactly. And I just thought that was a brilliant piece of writing, because you see it at the start. You see someone try to switch seats with him, and he does, and then like, so it's a good callback, because it's like a seemingly meaningless thing that actually plays into the climax of the film, where he realizes he's actually got to save Claire. I thought that was really good twist.
Because he changes seats in the premonition, but not in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the last minute twists in the other films, I don't think are as elegant or simple. Like, oh, I switched seats in the premonition is great. Where in the second one, the pregnant woman who never actually died in the original crash is just ham-fisted in there as like Kimberly having a last minute vision after the baby's born. She's like, wait a minute. She like has a premonition then and there and sees the pregnant woman like step out from the rubble, and she was alive the whole time. And they're like, oh, it doesn't count then. New life was always going to happen. Which just is, it's never a good twist when it's relying on something that's immediately revealed to you instead of something that has been hinted at the whole way through or like signposted at the start.
Right, yeah.
The fifth film is so great. I loved the fifth film. I thought it was going to be like marginally better than the fourth film, but it's actually like borderline my favorite one. Yeah, it's ostensibly like an updated remake of the first film as well, with like crazier deaths, and I think it's the perfect combination of the original film's tension and the later film's splatstick. You know, like it balances the fear that you feel in the first films with how fun and silly they get. And the reveal that we're actually watching a prequel to the original film makes it already smarter and well thought out than the fourth film. And I really like that the final showdown where Peter reasons that he has to murder Molly in order to take her life, only for him to kill the cop, and then Sam kills him, meaning he gets an extra life. That's good plotting. That's a good way to go, all right, how can we take this extremely limited scope that Final Destination's rules give us and actually make a compelling climax with it? Because it's not just they're chasing death, there's a human antagonist by the end, which is really cool. What I think is really interesting, though, is that it almost feels like Stephen Quayle. So this is the only film Stephen Quayle directed out of the five. The other four were directed by either David R. Ellis or James Wong. But it feels like Stephen Quayle understood the material after like monitoring the table tennis game between James Wong and David R. Ellis, and knew how to combine the best from the previous films. As I said before, the only thing that this film doesn't have is like that succinct map that's from the first film of how everyone dies. He's still just remembering it. But it does feel like, it almost feels like this sequel should have come out 10 years after the last one and just been like a love letter to it, because it is, you know, it's like this is what made the first one good, this is what people come to them for, let's combine them together. Because the fourth film is just it's so thin, it's so substance lacking, you know,
Yeah.
and so it rebounds from that in a really cool way. The fifth film is also the only one of the five to even be vaguely praised by critics, and I read some critic reviews for the film, and people absolutely love the effects and the 3D. People are like, the 3D is great in this one, and the bridge collapse scene. It was like regarded by a lot of critics as being like one of the best scenes of the year in 2011.
It was good, and that's like the longest one. It's like the first
Yeah.
20 minutes of the film is just the disaster.
Yeah, exactly. I think also Final Destination 5 deserves a place in the film franchise Fortnights Hall of Franchise Anomalies for probably being the best improvement upon a previous installment in a series. I don't recall another, I could be wrong, but I don't recall another franchise going from the by far worst received film in the series to the by far best received film in the series. I can't think of another one, at least not with this many sequels. All right, so The Final Destination, the fourth film, with its like poorly paced 80-minute runtime, it breezes by as bad as it is. It's got like a horribly written script. It's also like one of the most dated movies, one of the most recent movies I've ever seen because of how 3D it wants to be. And of course, its ugly title, which ruins the flow of the rest of the series and makes it all feel like it's an amusement park ride. Like you go to Warner Brothers Movie World and it's like, The Final Destination. Experience it, you know, because it's so gimmicky. And also, the worst thing about it, I thought, was the climax takes place in a cinema and all the movies are like fake movies, and it's like, am I watching Drake and Josh? What is going on? It didn't feel real when you have to like put so many fake cheesy film posters in a cinema. I don't know, it reeked, man. I hated it. I've got one piece of dumb IMDb trivia for The Final Destination.
Ooh.
So there's a scene in the film where an elderly man in the hospital says to his Asian doctor, "You know how many of your kind I killed in Korea?" The man replies, "I'm Chinese." But the Chinese did fight on the ground in Korea, so he may have killed some.
It's the grossest thing I've ever heard.
And I mean, to me, the fact that I've saved the third one till last kind of speaks. It's that, I don't know, I found it kind of dull. Other than what I would regard as the most unwatchable brutal death scene in the whole series, which was the tanning bed scene, which when I first saw it, disturbed me beyond belief when I was like,
Yeah.
I would have been like 11 when I first saw it.
I was like, because that was one that I knew about. I knew everyone was like, oh, that one's the worst. I thought it was pretty funny. Like,
Yeah, watching it now, it wasn't as bad as I remember.
and also the cut at the end of it was like phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
It's like an aerial shot of the two tanning beds, and then it match cuts to their two coffins being lowered to the ground, and it's like beautiful.
Yeah. I also really liked Mary Elizabeth Winstead in it. I guess I just found it fairly unremarkable compared to the others. But you're right, the photo plot device is cool. All right. So now we're going to move on, Richard, to randomly placed useless statistics. I'm just going to put these in random parts of the episode from now on. So as you said before, this is our second franchise in which Sean William Scott appears in at least one film, the first being American Pie. This is our second franchise in which Ali Larter appears, the first being Legally Blonde. This is our second franchise in a row in which a character gets their hand stuck in a garbage disposal, rising the tension of the scene, only for them to remove their hand unharmed before immediately being killed by something else. That happened in Halloween H20, H2O, and Final Destination 2. This is our second franchise which either did or was going to star Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. They were originally looked at for Alex and Claire.
Oh, yeah.
Which I can imagine Kirsten Dunst as Claire, but can you imagine Tobey Maguire being like, "Oh, death skipped me! Oh, wow!" This is our second franchise, which contains a character named Shrek. There's a police officer an agent called Agent Shrek. And if we ever do the Batman films, we'll have done three franchises with a Shrek, because Max Shrek, I think, is in Batman Returns. He's played by Christopher Walken. All right, this is the last statistic I've got and the most confusing. So you know how when we have a trilogy, we'll be like, this is the 12th trilogy we've done, da-da-da-da-da. 5 is the magic number for confusing ways of wording this. So strap in, because this gets a bit heavy-handed, all right? So if you count the original 5 Earbud films as one franchise, the current 5 Transformers films before Bumblebee is released later this year, the 5 Spider-Man movies we covered before Homecoming or Into the Spider-Verse, the 5 Twilight films, the 5 Jungle Book films, the 5 Shrek films, and the 5 Scary Movie films. This is our 7th 5-film franchise. However, Jurassic Park has since become a 5-film franchise, but we have yet to cover Fallen Kingdom on this podcast. If you count Jurassic Park as a 5-film franchise, Final Destination is our 8th 5-film franchise. But if you don't count Spider-Man or Transformers, since they no longer only have 5-film franchises, then this is our 5th 5-film franchise. And if you don't count Earbud as only 5, then this is our 4th 5-film franchise.
Right. Okay. Well, so because Earbud, Transformers, Scary Movie, and Final Destination those are the only ones that have like 1 to 5, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
No, you've got way more. You've got Twilight, Jungle Book, and Shrek. As well.
Twilight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those. Yeah, and Twilight. Those would be those 5 are the purest pentologies.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like Transformers is now getting as a spin-off, yeah, and then but they have. I mean, even like Scary Movie and Transformers for the next month, and Twilight are like in this year. Anyway, it is confusing. You're right.
Yeah, it's there's something about the number 5 that makes it not fun for the statistic.
Yeah, and also the thing about that with Sean William Scott is that like in this franchise and American Pie, he appears in the original and the most recent one, but not all of the ones in between.
Ah, true. Yeah. Okay, so you may or may not know this. I think I've told you this before, or maybe you've just come across it in your studies. Probably the most interesting thing about the concept for the original film was that it was actually originally an unused script for an episode of The X-Files. Did you know this?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so that script, the episode, was written by Jeffrey Reddick after having read a story about a woman who was on a vacation and her mum called her and said, "Don't take the flight tomorrow, I have a really bad feeling about it." The woman switched flights and the plane she was originally supposed to take crashed. Reddick decided to turn the script into a feature-length film at the behest of one of his New Line cinema colleagues. So he wrote this X-Files episode and some guy at New Line was like, "Don't fucking give this to the X-Files, like just make it into its own thing." So after reading the spec script, New Line Cinema hired Reddick to write the screenplay. James Wong and Glenn Morgan, who are also like renowned writers from the X-Files, they're like they're 2 of the biggest guys from the X-Files. If you were an X-Files fan, you'd know those names, is what I'm saying.
Sorry.
They were... Yeah, no, well, I am, and I just want to hold that over you. They were later brought on board to help with the script, making alterations to comply with their standards. I could easily see Final Destination being an X-Files episode, but I also think it would have been ultimately hindered by the fact that it has to be like PG-13. The violent deaths are kind of what make the movies so special, so I kind of understand that. Yeah,
agreed. Yeah, I do like it as a Monster of the Week episode of X-Files. I think that's kind of cool.
But at the same time, for it to work, Mulder and Scully would have to be like ancillary to the plot. They wouldn't have had to have... They couldn't have death coming after them, because then it's... it's not... they wouldn't be able to get away, and obviously... Although, fun fact about X-Files is that Scully is immortal, technically, in the canon. They never, really say it out loud, but Scully becomes immortal in one episode, and it's never taken away from her. So, she's apparently immortal, so maybe that would defeat death. That'd be kind of interesting, actually. Yeah. One of those writers, Glenn Morgan, had this to say when conceptualizing the story. The main thing they wanted about Death coming to get people is that you never saw him. It was never a kind of Michael Myers figure. You never saw a killer, and they liked the idea and said, okay, go write it. Once we had a basic story, I started cataloguing the strange coincidences from my own life. For example, I was in the Vancouver airport waiting for a flight when John Denver came over the loudspeaker. John Denver? I remember saying to myself, hey, he just died in a plane crash. That's a little weird. We wrote that version of that experience. We wrote a version of that experience into the script. It's cool. It's a shame that none of these movies cracked 80%, because It's such a good idea, and if there was like a supreme version of this idea, I think it would be a lot more hallowed. You know what I mean? Like, because it's a real good idea, I think.
Well, I think maybe if it came out, if the first one had come out like in the last couple of years and was like a Blumhouse movie, or it came out in like the 80s, they'd do really well. But because the 2000s movies are so like, that's considered like the dark days of cinema.
Yeah, the dark days of horror, where everything became dated immediately.
Yeah.
Within like 5 years, by 2005, like futuristic like chrome clothes weren't cool anymore. Like,
but something like Happy Death Day is like a real similar kind of not only like plot or like premise, but also like the tone they could have hit with it. And I reckon, and they did really well with critics. And I reckon yeah,
cool.
It's a good movie.
All right, so Richard, let's talk about some of the deaths. We're not going to go through all of them, but my first question for the deaths for you is, what was your favourite death? Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay, so I thought the best death in the series is the laser eye surgery in Final Destination 5, because it fucking gives it to you. Like, so with something like the like earlier in the film, there's a death that starts with what's it called when you get the pins pricked in you? Acupuncture. And so you immediately go, oh, I hate needles, yuck. And then he dies when a statue falls on his head. So a lot of the time,
you do see the needles.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, they are followed through. They just don't kill them.
Yeah. But a lot of the times Final Destination will be like, hey, here would be, like, there's a dentist one in the second film that he doesn't even get killed by in the end. It's like, it teases you. It goes, hey, you hate dentists. Hey, you hate needles. Well, what if they died? Just kidding. They're not actually going to die this way. But the laser eye surgery, her eye gets lasered off, and then she, like, gets lasered on her hand, and then she, like, manages to get her way out of the seat, and then she trips on the eye of a teddy bear that she was squeezing so hard the eye popped off, and she slips and falls out the window and then falls to her death, and her eye pops out as she dies. And I was like, that really like lived up to its promise of like, oh, I'm so uneasy about laser eye surgery.
Oh, right.
You know? Like,
yeah, but also she dies from falling out a window, so it's not like,
for sure. But,
she's going to die from the laser, which is what your whole point leading up to that was like.
Well, no, but it's okay, sure, but it's still, she still gets attacked by it, whereas the guy who got his hand stuck in a garbage disposal didn't get his hand.
Yeah, but your example of the acupuncture guy, he does still.
Yeah, that's a good point. But still, I guess I'm more scared of laser eye surgery than acupuncture.
Yeah. One of my favorite deaths would probably be the two Ashes, Ashlyn and Ashley, in the tanning beds.
Yeah.
That's actually a great scene, and like the fact that they're both called Ash as well, they both end up burning to death is pretty funny.
That is actually considered by critics to be the epitome of Final Destination deaths.
That's interesting, because you told me that there was one considered the epitome, and I was wondering what it was. And because I just finished watching the Watch Mojo Top 10, and I wrote them down if you want to talk about them.
Just rattle them off. Tell me what they are.
Okay, so number 10 was Evan in Final Destination 2.
How does he gets the ladder through the eye.
Yeah, ladder through the eye. So that's the garbage disposal one.
Yeah.
Number 9 was Olivia with the LASIK in Final Destination 5. Number 8 was Nora, who gets decapitated by an elevator in Final Destination 2.
Oh, that was so hard to watch, man. It's so scary.
Number 7 is Candace in Final Destination 5. And this is the only one I'd seen before, which is the one that takes place at the gym. And this one's like a masterclass in like tension.
Yeah.
It's so well done. The amount of stuff it sets up just to have the dumbest death. Yeah. And she ends up falling off the bars, and her body gets like contorted, and she's got bones sticking out. And
I just
people
don't think you would die that way.
Yeah, and
I don't
people
think
are
you
like,
would fall with enough force to die that way.
Yeah, everyone goes, Candace, call 911, and it's like, call the coroner. Like,
for those who haven't seen that scene, the reason it's so tense is that a screw falls on the balancing beam, and you watch someone narrowly miss it with their bare foot a bunch of times before finally getting stabbed. And
then number 6 is Billy, which is Sean William Scott with the like there's a bit of shrapnel under a train, and so it's just after they've saved someone's life, and this bit of shrapnel decapitates them. Number 5 is the 2 ashes in the tanning beds. Final Destination 3. Number 4 is Ian McKinley in Final Destination 3, who we think his death is skipped and then he gets crushed by a falling cherry picker. Number 3 is the only one from The Final Destination, which is Hunt, who gets his body sucked out of his butthole on a pool filter.
Yeah.
Which is real dumb.
But it's 3D!
Number 2 is Erin in Final Destination 3, who gets... she like falls back on a nail gun, and the nail gun's behind her, but you see the nails coming through her face. But it was quite a good one. And number 2... the honourable mentions. Let's go through honourable mentions. You've got Samantha, who is the one you posted on Instagram, who gets the stone through her eye. You've got Todd, who gets the first death in Final Destination 1. The teacher, who is like the most ridiculous death in the entire franchise. That she like... she gets stabbed in the neck, and then she's like slips over, and then a knife falls on her chest, and then the house blows up anyway.
Overkill.
And then the guy that gets crushed, he gets crushed at the gym by 2 weights. But number 1 is... Tim from Final Destination 2, who is at the dentist and a bunch of stuff is set up, and then he gets crushed by some falling glass. And I was like, how is that the best one?
It's so whatever. Yeah, that's a weird number 1. I feel like I always thought in the first 3 at least, the first depicted death was always the worst in the film. So when Todd gets strangled by the clothesline in his bath, his eyes turn red, and I remember that terrifying me because I saw the first one when I was like 9 or 10, and that just and then the ladder to the eyes, I think the goriest one, but then the tanning bed one, as I said before, from Final Destination 3. Oh, that scarred me.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
One funny thing about that is we watched that as a family. We watched that scene, and it was so horrific, and then at the end we were looking through the special features on the DVD, and I'll go into this more later, but there is a special feature on the 3rd film's DVD called Choose Their Fate, where you can actually like influence their decisions and have them die a different way, and we started with that one, and we just accidentally made it play out exactly as it does in the movie, so the whole family just watched the exact same horrific death scene that had just scarred us again.
That's so funny. There's also, because of that scene, there's a really interesting trend in this franchise that it has like a bell curve of boobies.
Yeah, we've talked before about how previous horror franchises and their like relationship with sex and nudity and how they're often paired with the genre, right? And its inclusion in Final Destination, as you say, it's a bell curve because, and I find it to be real funny. So in the first film, there's a brief shot of boobage in a porno magazine. That's all you see. In the second film, a woman on the back of a motorbike flashes her boobs at someone for a couple of seconds on the highway. In the third film, 2 of the main girl characters get naked on screen for a whole scene. The fourth one has like a full-on topless sex scene in it, but the fifth one has 0 nudity. But at the end of the film, it's revealed to be a prequel to the first film, so it's like the franchise continued to get like cockier with sex as they go along, but the fact there's no nudity in the prequel implies it's an in-universe reason, like Death slowly gets hornier as it goes on. Like he's like in Final Destination 5 in the year 2000, he's like, oh yeah, I'll just kill these people, and then in the first film Death sees the nudie mag and he's like, oh yeah, and then slowly as it progresses it gets dirtier and dirtier.
But yeah, I just like the fact that if you were to graph the amount of boobs in each film, it would be like this nice curve, because it's like 0, 2, 4, 2, 0.
Yeah. It's an immediate drop if you go in order of release, right? So it'd go like drop, which maybe that reflects the suddenness in which characters get decapitated or impaled. It's always like, what? So yeah, that's a real funny kind of thing that we both noticed, and I think that's just it almost feels intentional. It almost feels like Stephen Quayle included that in his film as another hint that it was a prequel. Okay, so when we did Scream, we talked about the rules that Scream sets up with its with it being like a horror slasher sequel and stuff. Now, Final Destination is famous as well for having the rules of death or death's design. And I've written down, as far as I can tell, there's probably a page that compiles this better, but these, as far as I can tell, are the rules of death, and then I'll follow that with the ways to cheat death, all right?
Right.
So the rules of death are as follows. They're more or less simple in each film. Death will come to you in some way or another. However, if you are one of the lucky few who have a vision of your death beforehand, you do have the opportunity to save yourself and others. It's never really explained why the protagonists, Sam, Alex, Kimberly, Wendy, and Nick, are all blessed with premonitions. Alex is given a brochure by a Hare Krishna at the airport before the first one, and I was like, I wonder if that's like how he got the premonition, but because we then find out the fifth film is a prequel, it kind of throws that out, because Sam in the fifth film isn't prompted by any kind of spiritual guru or anything. It could also be argued that it was Death who gave the characters their premonitions, and it was always his plan to have them escape and be picked off one by one. But I don't know. That doesn't quite work for me. But you never find out where the premonitions come from, which is something that I kind of maybe wanted to know. Or maybe it would have ruined it, like the midichlorians.
Yeah, I think if they tried to explain it in these films, it would have. Because they would have fucked it up.
Yeah. Death can only manifest or interact with physical space as either wind or puddles of water. And I think maybe lightning in the first film. All these things seemingly move of their own accord, though Death is quote unquote seen a couple of times as like amorphous shadows moving in the background in the film, across, like in the first one, but just before Todd moves, you see like a shadow move past him in the mirror. If you are not next on Death's list, you are physically unable to kill yourself. This is shown in both the second and fourth films. One of the dudes in the second film tries to shoot himself in the head with a fully loaded gun. He shoots 6 times and none of the bullets come out. And in the fourth film, another guy spends the whole day trying to kill himself but can't. Death will follow the order of who died in the initial accident but escaped, except for in the second film where Death works backwards through the list. As we said, each of the survivors in this film survived near-death experiences previously because of the survivors from the original film, so Death is course-correcting in that one. You are able to intercept Death's arrival through additional premonitions, hallucinations, or noticing several coincidences, such as eerily appropriate songs playing, someone's name or like messages showing up in something you're reading, or in the case of the third film, the ominous clues in the photographs on the potential victims prior to the initial accident. So those are like the setups we are given. These aren't the cheats yet, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because like there's only in the entire franchise there's one time that something moves or does something in like an unnatural way. Like they all could just be insane coincidences, but after Todd's death in the first film, the water retreats. As if Death is saying, okay, I'm done, I'll go back to what I was doing. And it's the only time in the entire franchise that happens, and it's the first death. So it's weird because that's the only one that like explicitly says like there is someone or something controlling this. The rest are just like, it's just a coincidence.
In Final Destination 2, the guy who gets blown up in the hospital, things just start happening in the hospital room, like the vents shut off and the bed starts moving, and it's not really explained how that happens.
Yeah, but even still, like, water can't just go back on itself like that. But vents can be shut.
Yeah, that's true. Vents can be shut. All right, so each film posits a new way to break Death's design and survive. I'll go through them, then I'll say why most of them don't work. So the first film, and feel free to jump in and correct me if you think I've misinterpreted, because I couldn't find like a list of them. This is just how I've interpreted them. So the first film posits that if you can save the life of whoever is next on Death's list, Death will skip them and move on to the next person. The second film, did you have anything to say? You agree?
Yeah.
Yep. The second film posits that if new life can be created by someone who should have originally died, then this will break the chain for them and everyone in the list after them. So if I'm next and you're after me, and I create new life, you're safe as well.
Right.
The third film is a little foggy, but it kind of implies that if you can trick death into killing someone who has already been skipped, this will break the chain, because the fireworks go off and should kill Wendy, but she dodges them and they end up killing Ian, who was already skipped from earlier in the film. So, and that's what they say, oh, okay, so death skipped us all now. The fourth film retreads by having... The fourth film's so bad, dude. The fourth film retreads by having the characters just believe that saving whoever's next on the list will break the chain entirely. Which, like, I get they don't know the characters from the other films, so they could think that, but we know that. We know that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the fifth film posits that murdering someone yourself who wasn't meant to die will mean that they take your place and you will be granted however many years they have left. Which I thought was probably the most interesting additional rule that I'm surprised it took them 5 films to get to. So, of these 5 cheats, 3 of them don't actually work. So in the first film, if death skips you, it'll just come back around and get you, like after it goes through the cycle again. In the third film, if you trick death into killing someone out of order, sometime later death will once again come back round. And of course, in the fourth film, saving someone doesn't, it just skips them, and then you're back to rule 1. Of the 2 cheats that do work, the fifth film's technique of murdering someone and taking their life often backfires. Sam kills Peter, who's trying to kill Molly to take her life, but then Sam and Molly both later die on Flight 180, which is completely separate to him. He doesn't have a premonition of Flight 180. It's not, so he just happens to be there. And it also takes the life of Molly, who never originally died and was only going to Paris because he invited her. And Nathan, who, as we said before, accidentally kills one of his co-workers early in the film, is then killed by falling debris after finding out that the co-worker had a brain tumor. So this could either mean that if you claim someone else's life, death will still find a way to put you in harm's way, or these characters were just unlucky, or because death isn't is it like an external force? It's both. Death is being unlucky.
Yeah.
So the only definitive way to cheat death, as far as we are shown, is creating new life from the second film. So the characters originally believe that this means they have to save a doomed pregnant woman and have her give birth. But the technique that actually works is Kimberly drowning herself and then being resuscitated. Across the 5 films, Kimberly and Officer Burke are the only 2 characters who escape death and seemingly live happily ever after. Officer Burke, I thought this was really funny. Officer Burke also has the distinction of being the only seemingly doomed character in the whole franchise who is actually invincible the entire time, because he's last on the list. So the only time he could have died is in between when Kimberly died and was resuscitated, and they don't even play with that. She just gets resuscitated and he's fine. So at no point, you only see him die once when the log comes through the his windscreen, the famous scene from Final Destination 2 on the onslaught. So those on the on-ramp. So those are the only 2 characters. It is an onslaught on the on-ramp. There you go. Those are the only 2 characters who survive death's design, or so I thought, Richard. For you see, Kimberly and Burke's fates have really slipped through the cracks of the Final Destination canon. The writers have been trying to kill these characters, but coincidences keep coming back, and so maybe their destiny is to live on.
Maybe there's an external force.
Yeah. Apparently, the end of the third film originally had Kimberly and Burke show up on the subway as well, and it would reveal that Kimberly was Wendy's cousin, which I don't really know why they would. I guess so they know each other before they all get killed. But the actors weren't available, so the 2 live on. Or do they? Because
that would have been a cool ending.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah. It should be noted that Kimberly and Burke's deaths are featured in a newspaper clipping in the Choose Their Fate special features from Final Destination 3, as I was talking about before, where you choose different ways that the characters can die. It says in this newspaper clipping that they both got sucked into a wood chipper, but because this special feature is specifically about watching alternate realities in which characters die in different ways than seen in the film, and the newspaper story apparently features a lot of inaccuracies and mistakes about the characters' names in the timeline, and also that a similar death is described in a newspaper article in The Final Destination about two different characters. Fans of the series consider these deaths non-canon.
Well, yeah, they just aren't canon.
Yeah, or at least the one very angry fan who wrote the Final Destination wiki article, who was pretty much grasping at straws to keep Kimberly and Burke alive, because he's like, this has to mean, you know how wikis are written real poorly? Like, this is like...
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, there's no argument to be made that is canon.
Yeah. I want to believe they're alive, because as critics point out, the sucky thing about the series is that it gets pointless if there's no way to actually defeat death. So I want to believe that that's actually the key, and that we see it in the second of 5 films, and then no one attempts it again. Cool. So, we talk about titles a lot on this podcast, and here it comes, guys. Final Destination... Alright. Final Destination is the inception of why I'm obsessed with titles. This is why. This is the origin.
Wow.
So the double hitter that is The Final Destination and the following Final Destination 5, of course, there's no, in my opinion anyway, there's no film called Final Destination 4. So you can't call the next one Final Destination 5, in my opinion. But they should have just called the Final Destination 4, because putting the in front of your film's title is lazy and confusing. You know? It's like the Xbox One. You call it something that differentiates it from the first like film or console.
Yeah.
And so for casual filmgoers who aren't as constantly aware of this, is, you know, you could see The Final Destination and think it's the first one. And why would you want to do that with your series?
Yeah.
It's also, the film like in no way evokes a sense of finality for the series, so it doesn't even deserve to be touted as the Final Destination film. The Final Destination film.
If Final Destination 5 had been called The Final Destination, that makes sense.
Yeah. So whatever you want to call the fourth film, The Final Destination, you can't call the next one Final Destination 5 because there's no Final Destination 4. I honestly would have this isn't a good title, preface. I honestly would have preferred The Final Destination 2. Like, that to me fits better. Or Final Destinations, or even A Final Destination. Whatever.
Right, yeah.
Just don't call it 5.
Or just like Final Destination, you know, semicolon
course correction. You know, yeah.
But I do also want to point out that if you include Freddy and Jason as 2 separate franchises, this is the 3rd franchise we've done that features a film which has The Final in one of the titles, which isn't the last one in the series.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
There's Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter is the 4th one, and Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare is the 7th of 10, I think. 7th of 9. Someone
on IMDb or one of the wikis pointed out that technically, because Final Destination 5 is a prequel, The Final Destination is the final story in the series so far. But first of all, knowing that spoils the twist ending of Final Destination 5, and that would also mean Final Destination 5 should be called Final Destination 4.
Yeah. They should have called it Final Destination 1.
Yeah. Kind of. So that's the spiel, the to end all spiels about about titles.
Yeah. Do you want to mention as well that originally Final Destination 5 was announced as being called 5-0 Destination?
That's
like
right.
Numeral 5 NAL Destination. Yeah. And if you write that down, it just looks like it says Anal Destination.
And then the next one would have been called like Anal 6.
But you did, and I've been looking forward to this all week. You said that you've got a big rant about titles that doesn't even go into the fact that of the numbering, so I would love to hear that if you've got that ready for me.
First, one small tidbit. The 3rd film was apparently originally titled Cheating Death, Final Destination 3, which is fucking dumb because Cheating Death isn't the only Final Destination 3 isn't the only film where they cheat death, so that wouldn't work to me. So all this being said, I think we can both agree that Final Destination is a pretty dope title for the first film.
Oh, okay, yeah, good. I thought you were going to shit on it, and I was like, I'm ready to bloody come back.
It's got an awesome double meaning. I couldn't imagine a better title.
Yeah, I didn't even realize the double meaning until I saw it in the original film. And if you're wondering, the double meaning is on their flight. They've when you're flying somewhere and you've got connecting flights on your ticket, it says Final Destination Paris.
Yeah,
and that's if you're flying to Paris. If you're flying to say London, it would say Final Destination London.
Yeah. So, did you know though, Richard, that back when the first film was an episode of the X-Files, the script they originally wrote was titled Flight 180. And I thought, first, Final Destination is the best thing they could have called it. So this isn't AJ comes up with a better title. But I did think it would be a fun exercise to workshop what the rest of the series would be called if the first one was Flight 180. So here's my pitches, all right?
Yeah, Flight 181.
So the first one's Flight 180. The second one, Highway 180 or Route 180. So we stick with the 180 theme. The third one, Degree 180, because it's a roller coaster, so you go 180 degrees in the air.
Okay, yeah.
You would have to play it up a bit more. You'd have to be like, this is why it's called Degree 180. The fourth one, because it's a racetrack, Formula 180.
Nice.
Or Door 180, Stadium 180. The area they're actually in is called Area 180 in the actual film.
Yeah.
And the fifth one was the hardest one to figure out. I put either Suspension 180 or Summit 180. So either they pushed the idea that the bridge is called Suspension Bridge 180. I don't know if that's even how you label bridges, or Summit 180 because the business trip they're going on, maybe they could have marketed as being like Summit 180, where we're going to turn your business practices around. Like if you played up that, then it's like their fateful business trip.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, they're not good.
No.
This is like because I feel like Flight 180 would be a good name for an episode of the X-Files. That would be this episode. Yeah. And then maybe if they were like, fuck, that was the best episode they've ever made, and then they wanted to do a sequel to it, Route 180.
Yeah.
But I don't think these wouldn't work as movie titles.
No, agreed. But, it's just interesting, like, where would it have gone? Because I think Highway 180 is the only worthy sequel title.
Yeah, or Route 180 or something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, the Speedway one as well, you could easily have 180 on one of the cars, but I'm not sure exactly what you'd call the film.
Vehicle 180.
Yeah.
Kilometer 180, and on the 180th kilometer, that's when everything goes wrong. Well, lap 180.
Yeah. Indianapolis 180.
The world's fastest Indian 180. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to dive right in, Richard, to continue the franchise. This, of course, being our flagship segment on the show where we pitch a sequel or a continuation of the franchise in some way. While there are plans for a Final Destination 6 floating around the internet, nothing has really moved on that front since the release of the fifth film. In early 2011, Tony Todd, who plays the Mortician, said that if Final Destination 5 was a success at the box office, then 2 sequels would be filmed back-to-back. I don't really know why those movies need to be back-to-back, but whatever. And on August 23rd...
reasons, I guess.
Yeah. On August 23rd, 2011, when asked whether he would be returning to direct a sequel, Stephen Quayle said, "Who knows? Never say never. I mean, it'll be up to the fans. We'll see how this one performs internationally, and if it makes as much money as the fourth one, I'm sure Warner Bros. Will want to make another one." Interesting then that he had the most critically revered one, and then, we've never had one since.
Yeah. I guess it's just due to the sense of finality about it.
Yeah. And the destination it was heading in.
Yeah.
So, beyond the films, though, you can consume more Final Destination if you so wish in the form of novelizations of the first 3 films, as well as 6 original novels, 1 graphic novel, and a 5-issue comic book series, all of which looked actually pretty interesting, and they all feature original stories and original characters and crazy deaths and additional rules. So I think if we can find them, that would be a really good one for film franchise follow-ups. Later on.
Which you can find on our Patreon for $5 a month.
Yeah. So, in a film franchise Fortnights first, I've actually already produced a continue the franchise of sorts for our franchise of the week. When I was 13 or 14, I made a little cartoon. It's on YouTube if you want to find it. It's real bad. Called Final Testination. And instead of deaths, it's getting hit in the nuts. It's the same setup, but instead of death, it's getting hit in the nuts. So like,
is this an episode of your cartoon?
yeah, it was. So like, one character like has a shower, and as he gets out of the shower, he slips on the bath mat and like nutses himself on the rim in the middle of the bath, and like, one character is in woodwork, and someone puts a box down on a file which is like suspended like a seesaw, and it flips something else up onto a shelf, which knocks over a toolbox onto a belt sander, which flies it directly into someone's nuts. So you know, I've already done it, but that's not what I'm pitching today, because when it comes to pitching our own sequels, we're both the same. I came up with ideas all fucking week, dude. Like, I kept thinking like, oh, what about this? What about this? Because the thing about Final Destination is each film is kind of the same setup and setting, so tinkering with that format at all can produce really interesting results. Like, you think about setting one in the 1800s, or setting one in a different country, or setting one in a retirement home, and it's a bunch of tired old people chasing death around, running into Rube Goldberg machines because they're done with life, but still not dying because it's not their time to go. But let's start with you. What is your continue the franchise?
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, I had set one in like the 1800s.
Yeah.
Because I've got like 3 ideas. So yeah, one is just like, yeah, like just set it in a completely different time period.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if, you know, you go turn of the century,
yeah,
set it in like the Old West, set it, you know, Middle Ages, whatever. Like, you know, there's quite a lot of, because you can't just copy paste it anywhere. The other thing I had is that you could make quite a good game out of these, like even like a point and click game, where you could either play like even like an in-browser flash game where you're playing as Death, setting up these elaborate Rube Goldberg machines for someone, or you could play like, you know, you go through and you're trying to identify them, or you're trying to set them up, or you're trying to like set them off or whatever. But I think it's probably more fun if you're playing as Death.
Yeah, yeah.
But my sort of main idea that I'm kind of interested in, and I think this would probably work best as like a novel, or even like an anime or a manga, which is like a first in terms of the medium.
Anime.
Because we kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm fascinated because Death is like so obviously a character in these films, but I'd love to see who it is that's giving them the premonitions. Because presumably there's some like opposing force to Death. You posited that it could be Death himself. You know, there's part of his plan, there's part of his game. But I mean, like, if you're a fan of Death Note, you know, it could be like 2 Shinigami that are working against each other. Because they are like almost kind of Death Note-y sort of things. And it's you know, you could imagine that it's like a Shinigami that's gotten his Death Note. If you haven't watched Death Note, it's going to not make any sense. Shinigami are basically Grim Reapers, and the Death Note is you can write a name in it and the person will die, and you can write how they'll die as well. So like imagine like a Shinigami or a Grim Reaper is fucked up and let a bunch of people live by accident, and now he's like got to course correct, but in the most like ridiculous way, so they still look like really they could be accidents.
Like, the unseen force behind all movies is actually, like, the Chris Farley of Grim Reapers. He's just screwed up, and he's like, fuck! It's his first day on the job, and, yeah, but, or you know, you can take it more seriously, and it's these 2 opposing forces, and this is, I think this would probably work better as a novel, rather than, it would just be too ridiculous to film. But, really have those 2 forces, and maybe they could be played, the one wanting them to die could be played by Jason Priestley, and the one who is giving them the premonitions is played by Eliza Dushku. This is if you were to make a movie out of it. And essentially, you've got true calling. Well, the mortician, Tony Todd's mortician in the films is like definitely implied to be some kind of in the know character.
I mean, maybe he's the one giving the premonitions, and maybe you could explore that.
Cool. That's a really cool idea. I really like that. Shall I do my one now?
Nah, I think we should just cut it there.
So after coming up with all these different ideas, I eventually settled. I was like, no. To me, the most interesting thing, or at least the thing we haven't seen expanded on much across the series, is the cast of characters. So it's either high school students or total strangers. The fifth one's like an office, like co-workers. But my sequel would be to see us visiting the set of a set of a film which stars an ensemble cast. So A-list actors would appear in the film playing themselves, and due to a freak accident on set, all the actors are killed, but it turns out it's only like Kate Blanchett's premonition or something, and she saves everyone. The usual format for the Final Destination films plays out, but with one fun twist. All the actors are now working on separate projects, and so their deaths each take place on different film sets within their different genres. And Richard, I've written them all down, and would you like to hear my deaths?
Yes.
All right. So the first one, Jennifer Lawrence is electrocuted by a faulty fog machine on the set of a horror film. Keira Knightley drowns during the filming of a rom-com climax where her character dives into a duck pond to chase after her eccentric lover. Will Smith explodes during a dangerous scene for his latest action film after he's mistaken for his own stunt double and winds up in the car that his character is supposed to jump out of before it crashes into a wall. Sigourney Weaver gets rolled up and suffocates in a green screen after it accidentally gets caught in the winding chain of a camera crane on the set of a sci-fi film. Sean Bean is stabbed through the heart on the set of a medieval war film after the trick sword was mistaken by one of the real swords, brought onto set at the request of the prop department as a reference. So they pick up the real like sword instead of the prop sword, the trick sword. Yeah. Jackie Chan is performing a stunt on the set of his next Kung Fu movie, but unfortunately a loose screw in the rig of a Steadicam operator causes the Steadicam to knock the camera into one of the tripods, which falls over onto the boom operator, who drops his boom pole onto a teetering pile of new script drafts, which fall over, knocking an ornamental orb which served as the film's MacGuffin, and that orb rolls along the floor into the path of Jackie Chan after he completes a badass wall run. He slips on it and falls off the high-rise set onto the craft table, impaling himself on the toothpicks and the sandwiches. I've got three more. Jared Leto's face is melted off after the sulfuric acid that he brought onto the set of James Gunn's Suicide Squad 2 to freak out his co-stars with is accidentally knocked into his white Joker makeup before it is applied to his face. And of course, a strap breaks in the centimetre-accurate rig on the set of the new Mission Impossible film, and Tom Cruise takes a knife directly through his eyeball. The film ends with Kate Blanchett, who thinks she's beaten death, getting run over by a bus which is advertising her next film. After this, we hear cut, and we zoom out of the movie set and see Kate get up from her stunt and brush herself off, and the director of the actual film, so say it's Stephen Quayle, right? He's there and he's like, cut, and he goes like, great job everybody, let's bring it in, and everyone comes in for like a group hug and a pep talk. But while this is going on, a helicopter crashes into the Hollywood sign, dismantling the giant H, which tumbles down the hill and crushes the entire cast and crew of the film.
That's one of the dumbest things you've ever said.
What do you mean?
It's so like it feels like a Robot Chicken sketch.
Yeah, of course. I'm not taking this seriously.
I feel like you
absolutely killed my buzz then, dude. I was like 3:22 in the morning. I was like, hell yeah, this is dope.
Yeah. I'm not surprised you came up with it at 3:22 in the morning. But I think you missed a golden opportunity, because every Final Destination film, correct me if I'm wrong, but every film has at least one death being avoided. And you've got Sean Bean in your film. You should have had his, like, he narrowly avoids his death. So, yeah, like, totally. All these A-listers die except for Sean Bean.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, I'll change that into the script.
But that's 3:22.
Yeah, I don't really have it. I thought maybe it could be called Final Destination, the movie. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think that another way to do that would be cool is if you set it in like, 2000, like set it in the year 2000 again or whatever. But and you have all these people, you recreate like all of their most famous roles and how they could have died filming their most famous role.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
But
cool.
I guess you'd have obvious homages like Sigourney Weaver's new sci-fi film is just obviously alien.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, you don't
that was
say
what I was
it.
going for.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Richard, that's about it. That's all I've written down. That was 9.5 pages of Google Doc.
I thought it was going to take you 9.5 weeks.
Not
It's a
this
movie.
time. I know. So, yeah, I guess that's Final Destination for you. Thank you very much if you listen to this whole thing. We're going to do something we haven't done in a while now called Franchise Roulette, where we randomly select our next franchise using a random number generator and a list we've created. Haven't done this in a while. This episode itself... Yeah, this episode itself was actually a Patreon suggestion. So if you pay only $1 to our Patreon, patreon.com/cultpopture, you too can suggest and vote for franchises. So before we get into Franchise Roulette, I just want to say that if you liked this podcast, then feel free to support Cult Popture by finding us on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and SoundCloud and iTunes. You can follow, like, and subscribe to us on all those things. And you can also email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. And please remember to tell your friends about this podcast and hashtag spread the cult.
Spread that cult.
All right.
Baby.
Have you got the franchise list up?
I have not.
I will find it. And I will be able to say it this time.
I better get the random gen up. What are you hoping for, AJ?
I'm always hoping we're eventually gonna one day we'll land on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the trilogy.
How many films are on there now? How many franchises, I mean?
There are 294 franchises.
No. Yeah, I hope we get something that doesn't have everyone dying in it.
Yeah, I would love just a happy, like a kids franchise. Well, maybe not.
Well,
those are real bad as well. Something in the middle.
193.
Okay, I'll go 193. All right, 193 is a 2-film franchise.
Okay.
Okay. Any guesses as to what it's going to be? With no
Bambi.
hints. It's not Bambi. It's live action. A lot of people die.
Are you serious?
Yeah, but it's not a horror movie. Look,
what
all I
era?
can say to you, Richard, is that watching this franchise is going to be madness.
Madness.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
No. Not madness. Oh, I gotta sit back for this. This is Sparta! We're watching the 300 films next fortnight. So that is 300, directed by Zack Snyder, old Zacky Snides, and 300 Rise of an Empire? That's what it's called. Yeah, that's cool. There we go. So tune in next fortnight for the 300 films. And after this is posted, we'll also be posting on the Patreon for all our patrons the vote for the next franchise after 300 list. We'll give it a bit so people can listen to this episode before we spoil it for our patrons by being like, this is what's next. So be looking out for that, and feel free to donate $1. Fuck, that's so lit. I would do that if I wouldn't be cheating the system. I'd donate $1.
Well, besides, we can already comment and vote without having to pay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's about it. Now we just got to go about our weeks, Richard, and notice all the things that happen, like when the wind blows over something, or I was in the shower yesterday and knocked the loofah, which knocked the soap off the shelf and fell onto the floor, and I stared at it and I was like, I'm gonna stand on this and impale my eye on one of the prongs from the shelf.
Actually, do you know what? I just remember my favourite death.
Oh, what was it?
So it's in the second one, I think. They're in a car crash, and all these poles come through the back of the car, and everyone apart from the driver gets out of the car all good. But there's this jagged bit of pole that's just missed her head, and they're like, oh phew, just missed, but she's now trapped in the car, and they have to get the jaws of life to get her out. And they're all like, oh, she's gonna get out, it's gonna be fine. And then she pisses off the guy that's opening it, and then they get into like a bit of a like, oh, yeah, and then the car gets like hit, and the airbag goes off and forces her head back into the pole, and she dies. And that was so funny. That was like the ultimate, like, that, oh my gosh, yeah, we cheated death, we're still alive. And then just like,
Well, there you have it, guys. That's Richard Martin's favourite death in the Final Destination series. And with that, I bid you adieu. Be safe out there, you know?
And with that,
Tie
I bid
your
you a
shoelaces.
Mountain Dew.
Very good. All right, goodbye, everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye.